I literally recorded for 30 minutes and had my mic mute. So tilted. Kids, I'm so tilted. Like, if I played Valorant right now in this kind of like mindset, I would get permabanned. Kids, welcome to another lesson on while loops. Okay. Right now, our current problem is this. A lot of you reflected, as in most of you, as in the majority of you, reflected the following. I know what a while loop is. I know what it does. I understand it when I see one, but I have no epic idea how to actually set it up. Um, Now, I do need to apologize for that. It's been so long that I've taught grade 10s and so long since I've taught like very basic level programming that I kind of completely forgot how to teach that, right? Because a good analogy, or not a good analogy, but a good comparison, is that if someone were to ask you, "Oh, what's 2 plus 3? How does addition work?" Sometimes something so trivial and simple, where you have done it for so long that you kind of forget how to like teach it. And right now, you kids have no idea how to do while loops, and that's completely fine. It's more my fault that I forgot how to teach it. So I'm not gonna say that this video is gonna teach you how to do while loop perfectly, but I'm gonna do my darn best to kind of break it down when to use while loops, how to kind of read a question. And by the way, the whole try to understand a question in programming is supposed to be hard. Because if you recall, like if you're taking math or science, the hard questions are the word problems in math and science, right? Like the mark booster questions are the ones where they would ask you like, oh, evaluate this or do the multiple choice question, and they save all the word questions for like thinking questions or hard questions. But basically in programming, every question that we handle is a freaking word problem, so it is difficult. But when we talk about while loops, at this stage of your programming career, a while loop can have two common designs. And it breaks down into two concepts. We know how many times to loop, or we have no idea how many times to loop. So if we want to know how many times to loop, the word question that you are reading will have some sort of a variation of these statements. There are n lines of inputs. That means the very first input that you get is going to be some sort of a number, and you have to loop and continuously get inputs that many times. Next, a question will have a statement like from 0 to 10 for 100 to 1,000 from a range of number, you have to do blank. That means you're going to start from a number and go up towards another number. That tells you how many times you have to do your loop operation. And lastly, you can have like a variable represent number of times to do an operation. If you have something like that, that also tells me how many times to loop. Right? So if you see any variations of these phrases, right, they will require a loop that changes a variable a certain number of times, and when it changes that many times, then we get to exit a while loop. Whereas if we don't know, yeah, we are unsure, right? It will have these kind of phrases, stuff like analyze inputs until a certain value is inputted. You have no idea when that value is going to be inputted, so you kind of have an infinite loop. Next, continue to change a value until it meets the requirement. You're going to continually modify. It can go on forever. It might never happen, but you're going to have to do that in a while loop. And then, or you have to determine if a value is blank. That's when you also might have to run a kind of an infinite while loop. And I'm going to show you how to set each of these types of questions. Okay. So if we know when to stop, we're going to use a counter-based while loop. So a counter-based while loop, the question will tell you when to stop or how many times to loop. In this case, it is a k value. What's the k value? We're going to read the question here. The shifty sum. In the Canadian Computing Contest of 2017, this was the second question for kids who are writing the junior level contest. Junior as in grade 9, 10s, and 11s. Suppose we have a number like 12. Let's define shifting a number to mean adding a 0 at the end. For example, if we shift that number once, we get 120. If we shift that number again, we get 1200. We can shift that number as many times as we want. In this problem, you'll be calculating the shifty sum, which is the sum of a number and the number we get by shifting. You'll be given a starting number n and a non-negative number k. You must add together n all the numbers you get by shifting a total k times. So in this example, if n is 12 and k is 1, we do 12 plus 120. In another example, if n is 12 and k is 3, we do 12 plus 120 plus 1200 plus 12,000 to get 13,332. Right? So this question has this k, right? Total of k times. So it says here the first line of input contains the number n that we're going to shift. And the second line of input contains k, the number of times to shift. See, the question tells you how many times you should loop. Therefore, we have a counter-based loop, right? It says the recipe is grab the stopping point as an input. That was our k value. Set a separate counter variable and set it to 0. So you're going to have two variables here. Then we're going to set the while loop's condition to be counter is less than stopping point, and we're going to increase the counter at the bottom of the while loop. To look at that as a code, we're going to look at int k is equal to reader.nextInt. And then we're going to have int counter is equal to 0. Right? We have these two variables. And I'm going to set my condition for my while loop to be counter is less than k. As long as this is true, we execute all this code here. And at the very bottom of our while loop, I wrote in my recipe that we're going to have counter plus plus, which is incrementing our counter by 1 at every loop. So if k is 3, okay, if k is 3, counter of 0 is less than 3. Therefore, I get to execute this code. Then after that runs once, counter becomes 1. 1 is still less than 3, so I get to execute. Counter is 2. 2 is less than 3, so we get to execute. Counter is now 3. 3 is not less than 3, so we get to actually make the statement false and exit our while loop, and we're done with the execution of our while loop. 0, 1, 2. Right? Counter changed from 0, 1, 2. That made us loop 3 times in this question, and that was dependent on k, setting the maximum amount of times we have to loop, and counter increasing from 0 towards k. Okay, so let's actually code the shifty sum solution. I'm having a lot of trouble saying shifty. I keep referencing Rick and Morty Swifty. Let's get Swifty, and it's driving me nuts. So I'm hoping to do this solution fast as possible. All right, so let's follow our recipe. We knew that this was a counter-based while loop problem. So we're going to create our stopping point called k, which was from the question. I usually don't like having variable with single variable name like that, a single letter variable. So we're going to have reader next int, capital INT, semicolon. That's our stopping point. I need to create a counter and set that to 0, which helps us set how many times we're going to loop. Therefore, I'm going to write while, my brackets and my curly brace. One thing that I like to do also is to say that here, write a little comment, this is my end of while. And inside my brackets, I'm going to write that condition that I told you about, counter is less than k. So as long as this value is less than the k value, we get to continue to loop our code. But to make sure that we end our while loop, we're going to increase our counter by 1 at every loop. And once counter is equal to k, we get to actually exit. Right? Awesome. So we need a number from the user as well, the number that we're going to shift. So we're going to next int. And then since we're adding values or inputting values, can say enter num and k, semicolon. Okay, now in this question, we're calculating a total sum. We're going to calculate all the values of it being shifted. So we're going to say int total sum is equal to, I would say 0 in most questions, but I know that for sure. With a single shift, we add a 0 to it. So I know when there's no shift, we actually just leave the number alone. I'm going to explain that. When we read this question here, when it said n is 12 and k is 1, it's k being shifting once, it generates 120. So if k is 0, I know that we're going to maintain this value 12, the starting number. So we're going to actually start our total sum with num, and k is our stopping point. Okay. So we have our num, we have our total sum. I'm in my while loop. I get to shift once now because I'm in my while loop. I get to add a 0 to the end, which is very simple. We're going to take our variable called num, and I'm going to update it. All right, I have our equal sign. I'm going to update it with a new value, which is going to take the previous value of num and multiply by 10. That helps us to add a 0 to the end, right? Because 12 times 10 is 1200. All right, it's not 1200. 120, right? So if it was n, we'll get like 10 multiplied by n. Awesome. Now I have this new shifted value. I'm going to add that into our total sum. So we're going to have total sum, then take whatever total sum was prior and add this new shifted value to it. And once we go up to this while loop and with counter still less than k, we get to multiply our previous number by 10 again, which in fact adds another 0 at the end. So if I had 120 and multiply by 10 again, that would turn it into 1200. And this will go on and on until counter is equal to k. Right? So our system.println, after my while loop is over, see, this is why I write my comment there. I'm going to write println the total sum is plus, you want a nice little space here, total sum. Okay. And if we test this code right now with
a few moments later,
there you go, 12 being num and 3 is going to be k, we're going to get the same output as the question stated, which was 13,332. Let's say we don't know when to stop. This is when we create an infinite while loop like structure until we find like a condition. To explain a question like this or a solution like this, we're going to analyze a problem that we have solved before. From one of our worksheets, I had this question made where I said, create a program that takes unknown amount of names and outputs the longest name. You'll know that the inputs are done when the user has inputted a string of capital X. And we had these sample inputs. And we're also going to learn how to use .length method here as well. But this question, nowhere does it state that we're going to have like a number of times or we know when it ends. We only know the ending criteria of being we have to look for a certain value. Okay, so this gave us a really unclear endpoint. This is when you have to create an infinite-ish while loop. And the recipe goes, create a Boolean variable and set it to true, like this. Then set the while loop's condition to be while our loop is equivalent to a value true. Then we can have an if statement that can set the loop variable to false depending on some sort of a condition. And let me show you how that would work right here. The code example is we're going to have a Boolean variable called loop outside of the while. By the way, this variable can be literally called anything. We set loop is equal to true. And I said while loop is equivalent to true, all this code down here will continuously run. Okay, it continuously runs until we set loop to false in this if statement. Okay. At some point, we do need to read the names. So I wrote string name is equal to reader.next line. Then I said at the very bottommost section of my if while loop, I said if name dot equals x, I'm going to make loop is equal to false. Okay. that once this code executes, okay, and we go back up to our while loop is never going to be true anymore. It's been set to false. That helps us to exit our while loop. So let's now code this solution. So I'm in Replit, and we're going to code the longest name solution. And just like I said in my recipe, we're going to have Boolean loop is set to true, semicolon. We're going to have while, a condition of loop being equivalent to true. I have potentially created an infinite while loop, which is terrible to have. And the while, but I'm going to need to have a condition that says if name equals capital X, whoa. Right, we're going to set loop is equal to false. And if loop is set to false after the while loop is over, we go back up to the while loop. We check that loop is not equal to true anymore. It helps us exit the while loop. Okay. Now at this point, I need a variable name because I need to check if name is equal to X. So we're going to say string because we're going to be taking inputs at every loop, right? We don't know when it's going to end. So we're going to need string name is equal to reader, which is our scanner variable. Next line. And for a simple message here, system println, enter your name. Boom. Okay. If we get a name that is equal to X, we're going to set loop is equal to false. Otherwise, we're going to need to do some calculations. Okay. We're going to have a variable called int current length is equal to name.length bracket. Dot length is a string-based method which will let us know how many characters that string had. Okay. Now I have this current length to calculate my name's length. I need to compare it with the previous maximum. If anytime you need to comparison, total sums, or anything like that, we need to declare and initialize some variables outside. So we're going to say string longest name is equal to an empty string. We don't know what it is. We're just going to set it to a blank string like that. We're going to also have an integer max length, the longest length that we found, and set that to 0. We haven't found any, so it's going to be 0. And then inside our else statement, every time we calculate the length of a name, we're going to compare it with the previous maximum length that we had. So we can say if the current length that we calculated is greater than the maximum length that we have ever seen, we're going to update these two variables. We're going to say longest name is equal to name, the current name that we're analyzing. And then we're going to say the max name, or max length. It's going to be the current length that we have found, so that when we find a new name's length, we're going to compare it with the new maximum that we have found. So end of inner if, end of outer if. And after this while loop is completely over, when someone has put X, we can say system out the println longest name, comma space, longest name, system println number of characters. We're going to include like special characters here as well as max length. Okay, so let's test this code now. I love how Replit takes forever to compile. So we're going to have enter your name. So we're going to have Mr. Park. We're going to have my dog's name, Marshall. His girlfriend's name is Freya. And we're going to have Jimbo, Bob, SquarePants. Let's tilt you guys. Triangle pants. And we're going to have X. As soon as X was completed, we actually got to this point. When X was not being inputted as our names, we continuously looped and looped and looped. And if anyone never types in X, we do have an infinite loop. Right? And our longest name did indeed be Jimbo Bob Triangle Pants because it had 21 characters. It was longer than Mr. Park, longer than Marshall, longer than Freya. So that was our programming solution for the longest name finder, where we potentially had an infinite loop. So kids, today we talked about making a counter-based loop and making a infinite-ish loop where if we find or use an if statement to like find a condition that we're looking for, then we will stop that loop. You can often use those to help you with most of the while loop based problems. Okay. Now I just wanted to talk about some tips. Anytime you have to do a total sum or compare with the previous value, you want those variables to be initialized outside of the while loop. Okay. There are times where it's rare in grade 10, but grade 11 and onward, you can have you could have a while loop within a while loop, and it's really only used to apply a complicated solution or a solution to a value, right? Or a solution to a value to a range of values. So let's say we want to find like a whole bunch of factors of many numbers, right? We write the factoring algorithm and apply that factoring algorithm to all the numbers in a range that you were analyzing. So if you have a code that needs to do something like that, that is often when we have a while loop within a while loop. And it's really common in the coding industry that you don't want to have a while loop within a while loop within a while loop, because once you start going beyond while loop within a while loop, your code actually gets very, very inefficient. I just want to say thank you for watching. I know you kids were working hard, but kind of struggling and feeling a little down, which is, I totally get it. BT Dubs, kids, I don't need you to like nor subscribe. You don't need to press the bell icon to get notifications whenever I make a post or a video. I kind of gave up the whole YouTube career. But I do want to say thank you for those who have subscribed. It was really funny, but I haven't posted a video in a really long time. But as always, if you have any questions, you can always email me, and I'll see you in school. Bye, kids.
Go Harbor, go Harbor. Nice.
Oh, it's the first line, okay.
Oh my god, 40. Sorry.
Last player
Two row.
Uses two heaven.
Oh,
Nice.
Initiated. Target destroyed. Bomb grenade out. One enemy remaining.
Hit 40, hit 40. He doesn't know, he doesn't know.
He's